So now it's over to the graveyard shift. So in the years past, I don't know who you've been with us for a very long time, but a lot of you might have met Keith Vrede, who worked with us. Well, in fact, he was one of the founding members of this business, okay, NewPay. And Keith retired on the 31st of January. That was his last day. So Keith looked after development and then also the BA teams and the infrastructure, IT, networks, all that kind of stuff, compliance, project offices, and so forth. So some of those channels were found into a different channel, but this man here has been part of the BA and the dev team for quite some time. And he put up his hand and he's taken over that responsibility formally from Keith. Yeah. However, I say formally because informally he's been doing it for a while. So he's been involved in the process with us for some time. So Keith always had the last shift before everyone had to go home, the graveyard shift, you know. So we thought it's just correct to give it to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So first things first, can you all hear me correctly? Yeah. Good? Okay, so I'm very new at this. I've never been to one of these before and done any presentations. I'd say I'm about 70% away from just throwing up. So, you know, we'll do okay. We'll do okay. But together we'll get through it, right? Together we'll get through it. Again? There's a box. It's one of your empty terminal boxes. We can use that, right? Okay. So, like I said, or like Vaughan said, he did a good job of introducing me. Ahmed, I run the dev and the BA spaces for NewPay and a bit of Delta. So I help out Pierre with some stuff as well on the BA side of things and some technology. I'm very technical. It's what I do. I'm not so good at the business talky talk, but we'll get there. Okay, so I'm going to start out first with just like our base hardware. Ultimately, we're a software and service business, right? That's what we do. I'd say the terminals, again, hardware. But without our software and our service, we can do nothing. We can present nothing to you. We can not really give you a product. So I wanted to start out first with something that traditionally was done by Keith. I never had it in my presentation initially. Vaughan suggested we add this because it's actually a very important part of what we do. All right? Our hard disk, this is what we spend. What we spend to make sure that the systems we give you have regular uptime, solid functionality, and capacity. Capacity is a very important part of this conversation. Yes. Up, down.
It's not picking up nicely, so we just want to move it to the top. Thank you.
Oh, okay. How's that? Better? Okay, cool. So as you can see, I'm being taken care of. All right, so, and I need it, trust me. Okay, so in terms of the hard disk space, we've increased that by 35%, right? So we've got terabits upon terabits of data, and we keep this, or rather space. Now, as we use more debit check and as more installments come in and contracts and maintenance, I mean, you saw that 14 million odd mandates, and I don't know how many million you had that, Brendan, millions of collections we've done. Each of those represents a piece of data in our system. That data gets stored in our hard drives, and we need to keep capacity in order to maintain an additional space as stuff comes in. You don't want to run out of stuff halfway through. If you run out of stuff halfway through the game, that's when you get slow reporting, that's when you get blockages, that's when you get downtime, any number of issues. We've always been ahead of the curve on this, but specifically with DebitCheck, we've had to really pump a lot of data into there. We spend millions on this. We maintain a capacity of probably, I'd say 30% at any given time, extra, just in case something goes wrong, just in case we get double files, just in case we get duplicates, so it doesn't end up clogging up our system. We can deal with it later, but we don't ever want to end up with a scenario where we have no space and we cause a problem. So we rather overestimate in terms of our cost, but make sure we don't have an issue. So what's that saying? We'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Same thing with the disk space. I'm not going to go into each piece of detail, but the same concept exists for disk space, memory, hard drives, all of our hardware. We treat it exactly the same. Pierre and I are probably not the same. He goes into a lot of detail and stuff. I'm going to gloss over this stuff because I figure it's pretty boring for you. You can just ask me if you have any specific questions about technical data and what have you. Okay. System improvements. It takes us roughly now, give or take 10 minutes, right? So all of those big days, 25th, it takes us roughly 10 minutes to get the big file from the bank, pump it into our systems, process the responses, update all our reports, update all our databases, get it ready to you. Where it gets a bit slow and where it gets a bit dicey is when the banks are late. So typically we need these things 6:15, 6:20, somewhere around about there. That's where we get everything done. And then we start our extractions for settlement. So we take all of that, calculate numbers for you, put it together, put it into your accounts, make payment, done. The problem comes in is when the banks give us something late. Now, it's not specific to our acquiring bank. We can't just point fingers at them. It's not fair. There's 10 participating banks in DebitCheck. Each one of those banks has a responsibility to process their collections early morning, generate these in files, send it over through BankServe, from BankServe, which is this middle piece of software, or middle piece of organization, you want to call it that, owned by the banks, and then send to us. When they send it to us, or to our acquiring bank, then our acquiring bank can give it to us. If anyone in that chain, any one of those 10 banks is late, that's why you get a late response on the 25th. Any one of them is late, it's a problem. There is escalations in place with PASA and all of the banking regulations and the Reserve Bank, but if we're being totally honest, DebitCheck is new. We talked about maturity, but DebitCheck is still new. Bear that in mind. 18 months is new for a payment stream. It's not mature, it's not even middle, or it's not even an adolescent at this point. Okay, it'll reach its teenage difficult years in maybe like a year and a half, and then after that, maybe it'll be a self-sufficient citizen in like another 4 years. Okay, but until then, it's still like, in its nappies at this point, right? So your problem is every time one of those things happen, we have to go and talk to our acquiring bank. They then go and log something to PASA. After PASA, then it goes to the issuing bank, and then they go point fingers and fight with them. And then that bank says, I'm trying. And then, eventually down the line it comes, and then our acquiring bank gets it. This usually happens in like an hour and a half turnaround, but that's the delays you see on the 25th. That's the cause. I know it's probably not the nicest thing to hear, but I'd rather be honest and transparent with you guys than give you some weird thing like we'll just solve it. We can't silver bullet this. If we could, he'd give me a budget. I'd take the money and I'd solve it. But yeah. All right, so we've done everything on our side though, that when we do get it, we're done in 10 minutes. We're done in 10 minutes. The only issue that we're trying to right now solve, and I think we actually have cracked it, especially over the December-Jan period, is while all of these responses are processing into the database, all of the merchants, rightfully so, are trying to hit that database to get the reporting out to see what are their outcomes, what's their collection rates. We've recently created a secondary, I'm trying to see here where it is. One back, thank you. All right. Another one. How many backs? Okay, cool. Again, I'm being helped. So, no, secondary location, right? So we've created a secondary database, that one there, as just reporting. Okay, it's a replicated real-time database that's just for your reporting, and that allows us to let you do all that reporting without any slowdown while we update all of the responses as they come in. So we've recently put that in. December, Jan, you'll notice we had very, very good times. Even though we were getting late files, it didn't actually slow down your reporting. It was doing quite well. We had a little bit of a hiccup in, I'd say, early Feb because of a bit of a poor implementation on a Sunday, but that's why we implement on slow days, because we want to check the volume the next day. So we'll do it on a Sunday, we'll check on the Monday morning. If we see a little bit of an issue, we'll solve it in the first hour and we're done. We never implement around busy days for this specific reason. Okay. In terms of, yeah, so we've seen a 70% improvement in speed for reporting just from our website and our web services. This is using the secondary database. We've also upgraded a lot of architecture in terms of web services. We've gone from a old school XML stuff to a lot of JSON and a lot of containerization. A lot of fancy words for saying we can spin up more of it as we need it. Okay. I think I've gone over that. Additional data. Okay, so this is something cool that's on the way. In terms of the replicated DB, like I said, we've got a second one that's basically for your reporting today. However, for those clients that are larger and have an IT house of their own, we are in the process of creating a third replicated database, completely real-time, bidirectional. What this means is you'll be able to ask for a view of your own data directly into the database, directly into the backend. You'll only see what's yours. And if you have a developer, if you have a small little BI team on your end, once you get past a certain size, you can then get access to this database and hit it for all your information. We'll do this at a fee, obviously. That's where Vaughan will come in. I just build the systems. He charges you guys. So if you want to fight with him about price, there's your guy, right? But yeah, yeah, man, I need a budget. He has to get it from somewhere, I guess. Yeah, it's true. I can see after this one, I'll get no help next time. It's just like, you're on your own now. All right, but in terms of yeah, so that's essentially all of it, right? That's raw data that you'll be able to access. And if you have a small dev team, this is what you want to do. You want to be able to have access to it. Okay, so these are now, I'm going to go into a space now where there's a lot of new functionality on the way. Specifically stuff that we build, our own IP. It's not something with we leverage the payment streams within the industry, but it's functions that we build ourselves. Okay, so today, at this point in time, you can do a new card profile funding from your service account. What this means is you have a debit check merchant number. That debit check merchant number does collections. You get successes of these collections. That value ends up in your service account, and then we settle you in the morning. Now, what we can do at this point in time is instead of settling you, we settle your new card profile directly. The problem is we actually settle the full value. So if you did a collection of 100,000 Rand total, okay, we will settle that full 100,000 Rand to your new card profile. You can then take the funds from that new card profile and just pump it to whatever cards you have. The problem with that is not everyone wants to fund from their new card profile. There's people who want to have a split between new card profile and maybe some cash in the business, whatever the case may be. Or they want to accumulate a certain amount in their service account for settlement later, whatever it might be, right? So what we're now proposing is, and it's a little bit more difficult, but essentially we're building a rules engine within our organization. Which one is the pointer? Red. That one. The one that looks like an engine light, man. Okay, that one. Okay, so it's an engine light. I figured people know what an engine looks like because it's a rule engine, right? If I put a whole V8 on there, it'll take up too much space. Be that as it may, okay? So essentially, the bank will settle Altron. We get our money in our accounts. We actually distribute it to all your service accounts. We calculate everything, all done. From there, we can have a rules engine sitting in our backend. That rules engine will say, this merchant number, this service account, this amount, 100,000. Of this 100,000, take 20% of it daily and take that money and put it into this new card profile. So that'll mean we'll take 20,000 Rand out of your thing, out of your service account, put it into your new card profile, leaving you to use that to disperse, and the remainder will remain in that service account. Bear in mind, this will run daily, every day. So that means if you don't have a daily settlement for that service account and it stays on 80 grand, the next day we're going to take another 20% and put it again into your new card profile. So it still goes to your new card profile. It's not like it goes anywhere else, but we'll run it daily unless it's got a daily clearing. So we'll do this before we make payment to your normal account, if that makes sense. All right, so we make payment every day to your normal account. We'll make payment for the new card just before that, then we'll settle you the balance, like normal.
So maybe just to add to that, the reason why we're doing this, how many of you have sat in a position where you transfer funds into your new card and then the fund's not available immediately and you can't pay it out, right? So that happens all the time, okay? So with this process, when we do that settlement over to your new card profile, we can notify Tutuka, the guardians of the new card platforms, we can notify them and say, listen, we've made these payments, here it is, here's the schedule with all of the profiles and everything. We will, NewPay, will stand in and good for the money, clear it to those profiles. Then you can transact immediately. Then there's no delay in waiting for the funds to come in. However, we do recognize and realize that you still need cash to run your business, right? You need debit orders running off there, pay your rent, your salaries, blah, blah, blah. So that's why at the moment, transferring 100% of the funds over to there, not really viable, because how do we get the money out of the profile back into your account? You can't. You have to go and take a new card and draw it from an ATM. That's going to cost you money. So that's why we're doing the split. So that you can say to us, do 80% into new card and 20% as my cash handling fee.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a few slides back on the reporting and the database. I have a problem that when my transactions goes into tracking, it also sits on my future. It doesn't go out of my future list. It sits on both.
Okay.
it sits on both, and that confuses us a lot.
All right. We can adjust it so that once it goes from an in tracking, or once it goes from a future to an in tracking, but that's also a bit odd because it should be at issuer at the time. So I actually want to have a look at that example, Vaughn.
So, to my knowledge, we've actually changed that already. So what used to happen, or what still happens, okay? So the banks have different rules in processing. So for instance, if you process through Absa Bank, then we have to extract transactions and send it up to Absa so they can send it to banks, have sent to the debtors bank, blah, blah, blah. 2 days before the time. With NetBank, it's less. It's 1 day before the time, and so forth. But the second you extract it to send it up to the bank, that 1 day before the time, it now goes out of the system and it's at the bank, but it's still lying in the future. And only once the responses comes in, we start changing it. But I almost think that we have implemented a change on that already.
In my mind, it goes from, so as far as I know the system and as far as what I've built, I hope it's right, okay? In terms of how it works, it goes from the day that we extract it, it's under an extracted status, so we've sent it to the bank. Okay, then on collection day, if it wasn't successful on day 1, it'll go to in tracking. It should no longer be in future at that point. If there is scenarios like that, just touch base with the CRC and myself. Yeah, please, yeah. Talk to the CRC. He'll discuss with us. Either way, even if you have here after the thing, we can have a look at it, but let's just have a look and see what those scenarios are. Sure. Are you sure it's not a reschedule of some kind? Okay.
So Ahmed, it might have been part of the implementations we did this weekend. That's why Ahmed might have thinking that we fixed it. We'll just check it and let you know. We did some implementations over the weekend, so okay, yeah. We haven't had a big one.
Exactly.
All right.
So remember what I said? We don't implement around 25th. We did it last weekend, but we built it a while back. Yeah. Go ahead. No, it's just it's a config. Correct. It's a daily thing and it's a config.
Can it be amended to say, for example, the 15th to 50/50 and the 25th to 2018, end of the month at 10/9?
No, not right now. Not right now. We can look at it in the future. We don't want to get to a point where it's so complex that nobody knows how to use it. Right? Because that's actually one of the problems that DebiCheck kind of shot itself in the foot with. That's why it took so long to deploy it from the bank side. It's over-engineered. It's made to cater for every single case out there. You don't want to do that. You want to have something fairly simple. And if you get a lot of traction and there's 1 or 2 anomaly use cases, then you want to get to that when you have some time. But you actually want to cater for the most. And then for the anomalies or for the niche, you go afterwards. But if you go for the niche from the beginning and you put it in every piece of function, then nobody knows how to use it. And ultimately, no one does then. Okay. All right, so we've covered the new card profile. Are we comfortable with that, or are there any additional questions? All right, so the next thing we're going to is merchant self-service, right? So quick way to say this, current single logon, you Drupal, you're used to that. That's the NewPay website, newpayments.co.za. It uses your single logon, which is your ID number. You guys are all comfortable with that today. You log in, none of that changes. We'll keep that exactly the same. We'll keep the credentials the same. What we're going to do is we're going to add a certain level. We're going to add another layer of security and functionality into there, which will allow you to do a lot of self-service. That's where we're going with the IT space at NewPay. When we say self-service, that means you want an additional terminal, you'll log it here. You want an additional service, you'll log it here. You want an additional branch, log it here. That's where we'll go to. So that'll save you the trip of SMSing or WhatsApping your CRC. It'll go directly to them. They'll be aware of it. We'll also process everything in the background, so you don't have to do a lot of the admin behind it. We'll source a lot of your existing details from your sign-up processes, your IDs, all of the stuff that you had before. We'll source it so you don't have to get the information. You'll simply have to confirm the information. So you don't have to do a lot of that onerous work you do today for an additional service. That's the idea behind it anyway. So this is kind of like what the page looks like now. It's a POC, proof of concept. We're just playing around with it. You can see it's just basically additional service, additional branch. If you're on an additional branch, you put in a merchant number of your existing one so that we know what to track and what information to use to apply to your new branch. So your name, I don't know who's at that location, contact details, that kind of thing. So we can just transpose it there. We'll get to the next page, you confirm it, and then pretty much your branch is up and running in terms of services because it's all aggregated, and then your terminal will arrive in a few days. So the idea is to set up a whole lot of automated systems in the back end that take care of a lot of the admin We want to reduce the admin effort or the overhead on both the CRCs engaging with you and you in your actual business. So you can focus on the, what do you call it, the growth and the actual CRC function with you guys at that location. Reduce the admin, focus on the actual growth of the business. So what we ran into here was a problem, but actually ended up being a bit of a blessing. Okay, this is the kind of functions we're going to go for that. But as you can see, so additional product, change of settlement or billing details, request for limit increases, payment of accounts, request for on-site visits, a bunch of stuff. And that'll just increase with time. That's what we're going to put onto that function. Now you'll see all of those functions is a very important thing to note. They are secure functions, i.e. you don't want anyone to change your settlement account without you knowing. You don't want a stranger or somebody even within the business that's not authorized to touch anything in this space. That presented a problem, like I said, but it also forced us to think of a really cool solution that has practical applications in other locations of the business, specifically to do with the fraud, a few other places in Delphin, a few other places in the mandate management. There's a few places this applies. We went for facial recognition. So facial recognition is the ability to identify a face, check for liveness, check the authenticity of that face, check that the face is at the location where it's being taken, and then make sure that it's correct. So it's basically an all-encompassing thumbprint, but with your face. You know who the person is based on their face. It's biometrics, but for face. We had to partner with someone from the States. They currently do, so it's a worldwide thing, but they currently do all of the biometrics for the airports in Emirates, a few places in the States. They work with the Department of Defense. So they are well accredited. They really do know what they're doing. And what we plan on doing in this space is for that second layer of security. So your normal login will work for your single logon. For that second layer of security to actually go into the self-service, it'll be a camera on your laptop or a webcam on your PC. You'll simply say, I want to do this function. Cool. Put your face in front of the camera. We'll check you are who you say you are, and you're allowed to do that functionality. And then we'll check it against the eHarness database to make sure that that ID number lines up with the ID we have. And then we'll allow you to do whatever functions you need. Now, that's originally what we wanted it for, but as time went by, we've been looking at all of the functionality in Delphin. We've been looking at the functionality in the fraud cases, the DOA, the stuff that Justin had. He showed you earlier with the ID books, who's right, who's wrong. Now, we'll expand it to that in time. We first want to put it internally so we can understand the technology. It's very new. One of the flaws we found is, one of the flaws worldwide that they found is that all of these architectures and the software was developed, but it doesn't really work well, or at least it was found not to work well, with people of a darker skin tone, myself included. It didn't recognize me the first time, all right? So you kind of have to, it's been upgraded, it's been fixed, it's been managed. The Department of Defense realizes they have to actually make these adjustments, and they've made them. So we're testing it again on our side to make sure that it passes muster before we actually use it. But again, if you think of the applications behind this, they're endless. When you have a person at Delta, or when there's debit order abuse and the guy gives you an ID, you're not going to bother to check his ID. You're just going to check his face. Put his face in front of the camera. We'll check his face in front of the camera. We'll go to Harness, because it's hooked up to the eHarness database. We'll get the detail back. We'll give you his ID number. We'll show you what his ID book like. We'll tell you who this person is, and you'll know for sure who he is. That's where we're going with this type of tech. It's not going to be free. Let me be clear. It's not going to be free because we have to pay a third party or an upstream supplier for this type of information. We have to pay the Home Affairs to get in there. It's complex, but it is a way to kind of reduce the fraud. Will there be other types of fraud? They're smarter than me, so yes. Okay. Is it going to be based on somebody juking you with a face? No. That's what we're going to try and prevent with this. Okay. Yes.
The face recognition, how will it work when, let's say, you are using WebLoan?
Okay, so it's a POC right now. We plan on integrating it into WebLoan and all of our other systems. We're going to look at the workflow and see what the least intrusive way of getting it into that system is. Ideally, it needs to be part of the existing workflow where when you check for an ID, instead of checking for an ID, you pop a face up in front using a webcam, and then the system does the rest of the work for you. Before we get to that point, though, we want to make sure the tech works. So we're experimenting on ourselves first before we actually put it anywhere in the market. It's just good practice, and we want to make sure it's 100%. Once it is, then we'll start looking at the workflows in Webfin. That's why we're not delaying or waiting for this in lieu of what Peer is doing right now with the ID number and into harness. That's still a level of security, but with all tech, you start out, like Brennan said, you start out at one point and you improve over time. So this is where we're going. That's where we are. Okay. So any other questions on the face tech stuff? Cool. All right, so the last item on my list, and then I promise we're done and we can relax for the day. You can ask me more questions and we can catch a bit of a nap because those 2 meals were heavy. Okay, so multi-acquiring, we've already touched on this. Stefan and Rodney did a great job. I want to talk more a bit about the technical side of things because we're actually quite proud of this. No one else can offer this right now. There's no one. Not another system operator. There's not another aggregator. There's not a bank because, well, they can't offer other banks, right? But we are the only ones that can offer this right now. The level of complexity and the number of hoops that occur in the background is intense. When you have multi-bank acquiring, you have to have all of those banks signed up with abbreviated names for each merchant. It's a complex setup. As soon as something goes down, we have an alert. When we have that alert, we then have to switch from one bank to another. And we have to do that seamlessly at the drop of a hat. This requires us to go through each one of these merchants, or all of the customers that exist in our database, see who's on the bank that's broken, and switch them to their next bank that they want. Not any bank, the next bank that they've signed up for. And you have to do this pretty much in a minute, minute and a half. Otherwise, it's not good. I mean, if you do it in half an hour, there's really no point. Because by the time half an hour elapses, maybe it's another 15 minutes before the bank comes back online. Now you have to switch back, and you've essentially ended up with 5 minutes of different mandates, which is more of a mess in terms of recon than it's a help. So it needs to happen in about minute, minute and a half of when we find out the bank is down. The difficulty here is in identifying how to settle who. So when we settle from our accounts to you, each bank has a different collection. Because now we're going to have multiple banks against the same merchant number. So you don't have to change your merchant numbers. You don't have to change anything on your end. Nothing. You simply do what you do today. We'll do the rest. The difficulty for us will become the settlement. So we're still building that side of things out right now. But the issue won't be on your end. It'll just be hard for us. But I mean, that's kind of why we exist, right? So if we can't take that pain away from you, there's really no reason for us to exist. So in that sense, I think we're ready to go. We are in production. We've actually piloted it already with a couple merchants. We have 4 banks at this point. The 3 we're going to talk about, or the 3 we're allowed to talk about is NEDS, Absa,
NewPay Direct.
NewPay Direct, right? Your CRC will give you more detail, and I'm not going to talk about it here because I'm on camera. That's just a bad idea, right? But you guys will, your CRC, I'll leave them to give you all the detail. All the juicy detail is with them, right? Yeah, so we really are proud of this. We really think that this will make a lot of difference in your lives. The entire purpose behind this is to avoid an August 25th. We got into that situation. It wasn't of our own doing. It was something that was thrust upon us, and we had to make decisions in the heat of the moment. And we could either do nothing or we could do something, right? And that is really something that was thrust upon us, and we had to deal with it. But we're not going to sit idle after a situation like that happens and let it happen again without preparing. It makes no sense. So in lieu of that, we built this so that we never end up with that scenario again. The part where we're going to need your assistance in order to make this a viable system or make it a viable option is the abbreviated name. Chances are, between now and at some point in the near future, your CRC is going to approach you and he's going to ask you to help him get abbreviated names, maybe some additional paperwork. There might be a little pain. We'll try and minimize it as much as possible, but it's a possibility. That's a bank sign up that we can't help. And if he comes to you, please deal with them, get them the information they need, because that makes this successful and puts you at less risk should a bank go down. Okay, that's the picture for everything I just said. I can go through each square if you want.
So
but
mail that out.
Yeah, I will send it out. But I'm actually not going to send it out because that's out of my brain, and I'm not going to share that with the world. But enjoy it, and we'll talk about it if you ever need to. You see, I went quickly. No one's taking photos. Okay. Edit that out, Keith, wherever you are. Okay. So minimal downtime, existing merchant credentials, existing terminal. Everything you have on the ground right now applies. You won't have to do anything. And that's me. Q&A time, if any.
So I heard one or two ahs when I said NuPay Direct. So just to clarify that. So NuPay is a channel where we don't process through any bank, but we actually push transactions straight into bank server, and from there it goes to all of the different data banks. And that is the NuPay Direct channel. The reason why we haven't made that available before, we actually do that already. We process that for one client, okay, like that. But we don't handle settlement on that. We've never handled the settlement on that specific channel before. So we are now busy with that settlement leg and process of everything, which will then enable us to put that down as one of our legs for processing as well. So that's the last leg. And then the other two banks is, like Ahmed said, is already Absa and Nedbank. And then the fourth bank, I'm comfortable to say it. So the fourth bank that we are working with and that we are busy testing live at the moment, Mona is testing them, which I mean them already built and done and dusted and everything, is Capitec Bank. So it's to acquire via Capitec. So those are the four banks that we'll have down on the system. I checked on the future transactions, the transactions lying in future. Sorry, I'm just skipping to the next topic quickly. But the transactions lying in future with more, again, the implementation guru, right? So he knows what's happening in that stuff. So, so what's happening with that is there's a timing thing. So on Nedbank, for instance, in the morning at 3 a.m., we receive a file that comes in with responses. Remember, Ahmed said up to 1 million transactions received in 10 minutes. So that file that comes in, the very first file from Nedbank comes in at 3 a.m. From Absa, it's different times. All of the banks, all of the places are different times. Nedbank's first file is 3 a.m. Typically, there is only transactions from the previous day that's in that file. But when that file comes in, it triggers a response on those transactions, which moves it out of future and into pending, into a status where it says it is waiting now for a response. Now, if we don't receive that 3 a.m. file, our next updated run on that is about 6:30 from the bank. So then it remains in future until that next file comes in. And that is where the delay comes in. So sorry for that. We have to figure out a way to do that without receiving something. So yeah, a kickoff process or something. But it is not something that we've ignored. We know about it. And we are definitely looking at ways to improve that. Yes.
Yeah, I think only two components I just want to run over. In terms of the four banks that he mentioned, like you said, we're in production, we're looking good. Priority bank right now is Nedbank. The others are backups. So Nedbank's your priority bank. That's the bank we use. That's the bank we trust. That's the place that we put all our volume in. And they've managed to deal with our volume. The reason, maybe we should also have a little bit of a chat about that, because I mean, we did bring up the August thing in here once or twice. Part of the reason why the August thing hit so hard was because we're the biggest volume. Our merchants together, all of us together, this family puts the biggest volume of debit check cross bank in the country. There's no one else. Okay? And no one was ready for volume like this in debit check. It's a new system. Whenever you throw volume at it, you can't test volume in production. There's no such thing as a test bank account. It doesn't exist. Can't debit nothing. So the production volume, when it hit that tipping point was August, and that's when the acquiring banks were not able to deal with the volume, hence the issue in August. That's the thing that happened to us, right?
Yeah.
So the volume now is trusted. They're capable of dealing with our volume. They've made the changes. As we've done upgrades, they've done the same. And that's why they are our primary bank. Regardless, though, we're not taking any chances. Hence the secondary, hence the secondary and the multi-acquiring banks. The others can be a secondary and backup bank, but it's not a question of switching from one bank to the other as you need to. It's a question of one bank being down and we switch it. If we switch as needed, you end up in a sorted source problem, and we don't actually want to talk about that because no one here knows it. We don't know what that means. Okay?
Yeah, that is illegal.
Right?
Not
so we won't talk about that. In terms of collections, very important. The switching and the multi-acquiring is for mandate initiation only. Wherever you initiate the mandate, you have to collect using that same acquiring bank. Debit check rules, it's non-negotiable right now at PASA. Having said that, the risk to collection requests is minimal because we send up the collection request 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, the day before. So if the 25th, we send it up the day before. Even if something goes wrong, it leaves us with a whole 15, 16 hours with extensions at the bank if we have to, if one of the banks mess up. So we can correct that pretty quick, and we get notified of it pretty quick if something does happen. Okay, I think that's it for me from a technical point of view. Very cool.